Cover, concealment, movement for the gunfighter. That's what we're going to be talking about today on Gunfighter Life. More and more I've been leaving out the bio, especially when we're talking about like a specific cartridge or things like that, but to establish some bona fides, some street cred on what I'm talking about, I'm going to put in the shortest version of the bio just so you have some idea that I know what I'm talking about on this. Bio. First and foremost, I am a Christian. That is number one in my life, serving God, following Jesus. Combat veteran, served in the United States Marine Corps and the Army. Also law enforcement veteran, private contractor, state rifle and pistol champion. Professional big game hunter and guide. If you feel called to support, check out Patreon. There should be a link in the show notes. With that, I am your host, Michael Milito, and I am blessed to serve you today. The short definition of cover and concealment is concealment hides you and cover stops bullets. That's a pretty easy black and white definition. However, there's a big gray area when we talk about this, because what is cover for one round is concealment for another round. Even in the handgun world, what is cover for a 380 might just be concealment for a 45 ACP. Or what is cover with a 5.56 because it's high velocity and tends to fragment on harder targets may only be concealment with a 308. But even with a given caliber, you may still have some gray area there. If you're talking your standard 9mm round, you're talking about a standard residential or commercial wall inside a building, an interior wall, right? If you're just hiding and you get shot at, or you're shooting at somebody and it just goes through two pieces of drywall, that's concealment. Even if it hits a 2x4 the right way, it's just concealment. But if it hits the 2x4 just right at just the right angle, that might be enough for concealment, especially if it's an expanding round that expands in that wood, decreasing its ability to penetrate. So just know that although they're often used as hard and fast terms, they're really not. It's more of a gray area. You could be hiding in some thick shrubs and get shot at, and just the branch is just big enough to deflect that bullet. It didn't stop the bullet, but it stopped it from hitting you. So again, there's a gray area in ballistics. There's certainly a gray area, I think, between cover and concealment that's not often taught. It's often taught as doctrine. This thing is cover, this thing is concealment. Like a, cinder block wall is cover. Well, that depends on what you're getting shot at with and how long you're getting shot at. It might be cover for 2 rounds, and then on the third or fourth it becomes concealment because it no longer has its integrity to stop bullets. And that's one thing I'd like to clarify with all the training and stuff that I've had, that it's a lot more gray than some people might have you believe. On movement, what is harder to hit? A stationary target or a moving target? Think about that for a second. A moving target is harder to hit. A fun exercise you might want to do, a piece of fishing string or cheap twine. Obviously set this up the right way. Listen to what I'm saying. Don't be dangerous. While your partner has his pistol holstered, just go out and set up a 1-gallon jug with a safe backstop at a given distance. Let's say 7 yards. You see how hard it is to hit that. Hopefully not very hard. Tie a piece of string to it. Give a 7-yard line and let's say a 3-yard line. Stand behind your friend and run backwards away from the firing line holding that string so that jug comes to the person like a threat would. And see how much harder it is to get hits on that jug. Likewise, if you put like a tent stake or something in the ground and can do it safely, you can do it side to side. And see how much harder it is to hit a moving target than a stationary target. So don't be a stationary target. On Now, whether we're talking about cover, concealment, movement, all three, something is generally better than nothing. Something is probably better than nothing. I would rather be behind the engine block of a car than a car door, but a car door is better than nothing. I would rather have a concrete wall over a drywall wall, but I'll take one over nothing. If my gun is empty and I have to reload, even if I have no cover concealment, it's almost certainly better for me to be moving, unless there's like a danger area that I can't go, like I'm stuck in one place for whatever reason. But if I can move and I have to perform a reload while I'm not shooting, why would I stand in one place? I should be moving if I'm reloading. So something is better than nothing. Even if you can't get to cover and concealment, at least you're moving during your reload when you're not returning fire. It's better than just standing there. The next point I want to belabor here is a lot of people, I think, underestimate what bullets will go through. It's often touted in the tactical internet forum community, over penetration. Listen, anything that's going to reliably stop a human being is going to penetrate most residential, commercial type walls. It just is. The human body is pretty resilient. It's pretty tough. I could walk up to a normal piece of drywall right now and punch a hole in it. I can't punch a hole through you. I speak as somebody who's been a professional door kicker in different military, law enforcement. I can kick open pretty much any regular door. Whether that be commercial, residential, I can just kick it open. I can just bust it open. Can't kick a hole through a person. It's just anything that's going to reliably stop an individual is also going to go through several layers of drywall. Or the 1.5 inch section of light pine that's in a 2x4. Or going back to the car door analogy, you think a car door, it's metal, it's got all kinds of metal inside it. Surely that will stop, a 9mm, I'm just using that as an example, but it won't. Unless it hits at just some weird angle, it hits a crease in the metal or something, most of your rounds are going to go straight through a car door. So the main point is that bullets will go through a lot more than a lot of people think that they will. Keep that in mind on both ends, whether you are taking incoming rounds or sending rounds down range. Gunfighting, despite what a lot of people might think, is not a brute force game. It is a thinking man's game. It is a lot more like chess, in my experience, than whack-a-mole. Let's look at this going into the next point. Room clearing, pieing. That's simply a matter of geometry and doing it well. And I've been to all kinds of different schools, whether it was Marine Corps, mount training, or Mojave Viper, where I was one of the initial instructors, or FBI or LAPD or whatever it is. There's different sub-techniques they teach, and in the micro there are some differences, and I'm not even going to say that they're not significant differences, but pretty much all of them are just a game of geometry. You using that cover and concealment and angles to minimize your chance of getting shot and maximize the chance that you're going to take out an opponent. I got the honor of meeting one of the patrons in person. Would have been last year, I believe. And he was asking me about my LAPD times. I think he was a little disappointed. He asked me about some kind of show about LAPD, which I don't have a television, so I had never seen it. And he's asking me about the dangers of, if you've listened, I've done some more specialized assignments, fugitive recovery, and some other stuff, how dangerous that was. And I said, honestly, it's probably more dangerous for the patrol cop when you're just a regular patrol beat cop. And here's why. You go to all kinds of calls. You go to a domestic violence call. You go there, the RP, the reporting party, female called you for help and you get there and you start hauling her husband away, and this is just a random example, just a theoretical, and then she decides she doesn't want you to take her boyfriend, husband, whatever to jail, and she turns on you and grabs, a Jennings 380 or whatever it is. Not what you were expecting, not something you can really plan for that well. Or a traffic stop. If you stop 20 cars a night, every day, for a decade, for 10 years, you can't be in condition red all the time to use the color codes. When I'm doing a tactical mission, whether I am planning it or a participant in it, like if I'm doing fugitive recovery, we're about to go kick a door, we're in condition red. We've looked at that, we've probably pulled up maps, blueprints, we've done an area study, we know our suspect, we know his modus operandi, his MO. We're studying all that stuff and we're in condition red. We're ready. We've hopefully planned it out so that nothing's going to really surprise us. And not that that's not dangerous, but again, it's a thinking man's game. Gunfighting is very much a thinking man's game. Especially, well, all of it, but urban warfare especially. There's so many angles, so many different things that go into that. Room clearing, smooth movement in and around cover and concealment, and using and utilizing cover and concealment, pieing, searching, all that stuff. It can mentally exhaust you. If you're doing out in the desert and it's 100 and something degrees and you're wearing full body armor, it can physically exhaust you too, but it's mentally exhausting. You're constantly thinking, you're constantly on your toes. You should be constantly in condition red. There's a lot of thinking going on, and thinking when you're seated in a nice comfortable chair playing chess is one thing, but trying to maintain a level head and think critically and use angles and cover and concealment and all that, when you are pumped full of adrenaline and testosterone, that's a more difficult thing to achieve in my experience. And to be doing all that and thinking about that and still being able to shoot well, not just press a trigger. Shoot well, sight alignment, sight picture, slow, steady, press, remembering to breathe. They may sound very simple, but when you add it into all the other things and having rounds incoming, it's not so simple. So I guess to boil that down, gunfighting is very much a thinking game, and covering concealment is very much a thinking game. I'll give you a clear example of that you have to fight against. It's very natural, especially when you start teaching new gunfighters, whether they be Marines or soldiers or police officers or civilians. If you're doing some kind of opposition force, or even if you're not, where they're taking simunition rounds, getting shot at, they run up to cover and or concealment and they hug right up to it. I guess it's some kind of security thing. They get right up on it. But that's not what you want to do. You want to be back away from it. Like if I'm going up to a concrete wall, I don't want to be right up on the wall. I want to be at least an arm's length. Probably more. I would say an arm's length and a half is probably my go-to. For a couple of reasons. If you've ever been on the other side of incoming rounds, not sims, but like real rounds, when they come through, produce a lot of shrapnel. If that shrapnel's not deadly, it can really mess up your OODA loop when you get hit in the face with a bunch of whatever it is, rocks, sand getting in your eyes, whatever it is. You being back away can really reduce that. Also, after that bullet, if it did go through that barrier, it should hopefully be rapidly losing energy. That space is better. Also, it's a kind of well-established, well-documented phenomena that in urban warfare, in shooting and ballistics, that a bullet will often hit the wall if it's shot at an angle and travel very close to that wall, going along that wall. So you don't want to be along that wall. You want to be backed away from it. So for all those reasons, and another one I'm about to get to, you don't want to be right up on that cover, and that's something you really have to train. Because pretty much most people, when they're getting shot at, when they're stressed, they are going to go hug right up on that cover. And that's not necessarily a good thing, unless you have to. Like if you back away from it, then you're going to be exposed. Then sometimes you have to hug that cover. But in general, you want to be back away from it, especially if you're talking about like pieing, room clearing, things like that. Here's another big mistake with cover and concealment. Putting your gun on the other side of said cover and concealment. Putting your gun into the doorway when you can't see in that doorway, or rifle barrel for that matter. Makes it pretty easy for an adversary to grab your handgun, grab your rifle barrel, and or just return fire because he knows you're about to come. Like if he knows you're about to go through that door, you're advertising. You're pretty much putting up a neon sign for him. Hey, shoot me now. I'm about to be through, because your gun is through, but you're not, so you can't see anything. But your gun is there, so he knows what's coming. He can either grab it if he's unarmed, or he can just shoot you when you come through. Another thing you have to think about when you're going through a door, you don't just run through a door with your gun out. You should compress, bring that gun in, or work a better angle. If it's a rifle, like bouncing off the far side of the door frame, which is probably hard to explain in audio, but with a handgun, you compress it into your body. You can still have it at a compressed ready to shoot if you have to, but you're not advertising ahead of time that you're coming through the door, and you're not giving that opportunity to grab the gun. And if the gun's tight into your body and you have a hold of it with both hands, you then have the mechanical advantages because he is reaching out for the gun and you have it held tight. You have the mechanical advantage. If your gun is out in front of you and you go through the door and he grabs it and pulls it in tight, then he has the mechanical advantage. And then you're on the wrong mechanical advantage over wrestling for your own gun. When you're moving through cover and concealment, make sure you can press that gun. Likewise, when you're moving through a door, don't stay in the door. It's commonly referred to as the fatal funnel. Talking about concealment, it's like the exact opposite of concealment. You are literally silhouetting yourself. If you enter in a dark room and penetrate into that dark room, there's different techniques, again, taught in different schools. Shallow penetration, 3/4 penetration into that room. Either one of those really is far better, though, than staying in the doorway, because you're telegraphing. Everybody in that room is going to be able to see you standing in that doorway, probably even if it's dark. If you go into that room, you're a lot less likely to attract attention in that doorway, because if somebody in that room is trying to kill somebody coming in, where are they going to have their attention directed to? The door, right? Because you're coming in the door. Unless you're talking about urban breaching and things like that, which I was an assaultman in the Marine Corps. I'm familiar with both mechanical breaching and demolitions, but that's outside the scope of what most people are going to probably listen to this podcast for. But the exact opposite of concealment, just standing there and skylining yourself. Another technique for cover and concealment, if you have to do the quick peek, as it's often called, around cover or concealment to see what's on the other side of it, don't pop up in the same place 3 or 4 times. If you're doing a quick peek, if you pop in and look around and go back behind cover or concealment and pop out again, if I'm the bad guy and I saw you pop out the first time, I'm probably going to be aimed at that spot and shoot you when you pop out the second time. So when you do that quick peek, either do it once, long enough that you can actually see and process information, rather than doing it so quick you have to do it 3 or 4 times, or do it in a different location. Either have a buddy do it on the other side of the door, or you do it at a prone or kneeling position, not in the same place you just were on that cover and concealment. The next thing I want to talk about is movement. Again, moving is important. Probably the first time you do a reload while moving, or shooting while moving, or moving really fast and then shooting again, should probably not be when you're taking incoming rounds. You should probably practice that and drill that. If you've done it so much that it's hard for you to mess up because you've just done it so much. Like talking about it being a thinking man's game, there's going to be a lot going on. You shouldn't have to think about how to move and reload. You should just do it. Automaticity. The proper term, I think, for what is commonly referred to as muscle memory. Your muscle doesn't have a brain. But automaticity. You just do it without thinking about it. Like the difference of somebody that's really familiar with driving a stick shift and somebody that's just learning to drive a stick shift. They're both shifting gears, but one's just doing it. And the other one has to really think about the pattern and pressing the clutch in and did it catch, and they're grinding gears. There's the person that's super familiar with it because he's got a lot of reps and sets. He just does it. He doesn't even think about it. The same thing with common tasks like that. reloading while moving, or shooting while moving, or shooting a couple of rounds, sprinting to another location and shooting a couple of rounds. That getting into and out of position. The first time you're trying to figure out how to set up on a barricade or set up behind cover and shoot quickly probably shouldn't be when you're getting shot at. You should probably know that. One of the big things that really got me when I was in Florida, I went to several ranges. None of them let you even draw, let alone move while shooting, move back and forth, sprint, reload while moving. And now that's not the foundation, that's not where you start, but I couldn't even find a range out of several that I went to that would allow you to do that. Even when I went to what was labeled wilderness, they didn't let you shoot there or be off a trail. So how do you, if you're in that kind of really urbanized environment, Florida has like 400 and something people per square mile. How do you even train there unless you're like part of the landed gentry that just has a bunch of land, private land you can shoot on? I don't know, but you got to figure out a solution to that. Because movement is important. If you're more than just a guy that has a gun and just wants to carry a gun for the bravado and have a Second Amendment t-shirt and a MAGA cap, but not actually be ready for a gunfight. If you want to actually be ready for a gunfight, then you should train the things and the skills that are probably going to come up in a gunfight. Using cover and concealment, shooting around a barricade, moving from one barricade to another. Once your reloads are pretty good, then start reloading on the move. Here's the thing. You start getting shot at, you're almost certainly going to move. Like, you're just going to do it. If you need to be returning fire, the first time you are shooting and moving probably shouldn't be in that situation. Again, you're going to have a lot on your mind. Hopefully you're not panicked and have nothing on your mind and just freeze. Or you're going to have enough other things to think about, like identifying where you're going and where the threat is. That shooting and moving should be a lot more ingrained and something you have to think about less because you've done it a bunch. Now you need a firm foundation. Don't go out to the range and start trying to be John Wick when you can't, hit a silhouette target at 7 yards consistently from the draw. But it's a progression, and if you're serious about gunfighting, these are things you should probably do. And if you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, then go get some training. There's a lot that goes into cover and concealment. I guess I will end on talking about some common and good cover for common things. If we're talking about a house, brick is pretty good. Concrete, obviously, pretty good. Many things in a stick-built home, like a common home, that's a lot more concealment than cover. If we move to vehicles, again, car doors generally don't stop common rounds. 9mm, 5.56, 308. There's not going to stop those most of the time. You could hit it in just the right spot at just the right angle and it hits the door lock or something. But in general, they don't stop bullets. The few things and some of the best things on the vehicle that do are the A-pillar, B-pillar. Cars today are designed to be pretty safe and for you to be able to survive if the car rolls over. Because of that, they have a pretty stout pillar right behind where you sit, right usually where the seatbelt attaches or somewhere close to it. That big hunk of metal that runs there is usually pretty stout, again, because it has to stop the vehicle from crushing when it rolls over. That A-pillar, the one right behind you, is a pretty good, although it's not very thick, but it's pretty good at stopping bullets. They can stop a lot of full-powered, even rifle rounds. So that pillar, A-pillar, and depending on the vehicle, you may have a B-pillar in the back. But that's pretty good at stopping bullets. Also an engine block, although that really depends, right? If it's your car, you probably know where the engine is, but the entire engine compartment is not the engine block. The engine block, especially depending on what kind of vehicle it is, could be quite small inside that engine compartment. So don't think that because you're behind the hood, behind that front end, that it's going to stop a bullet. Engine blocks will, but if you have no idea where that engine block is, maybe not the best bet. Wheels, metal wheels, they're okay. So if you have to get behind the wheels, again, use geometry. That A-pillar is not very big, but there's one on the other side too. If you can stack those using geometry so that you double the width of them so they line up So the edge of one is just meeting the edge of the other. You just doubled the width of that cover. Again, geometry, a thinking man's game. You can do the same thing with the wheels. You can move at an angle so those wheels are side by side where the edge of one rim is touching the rim of the other, giving you quite a bit more cover than you would have if they were perfectly in line. Just some, right? Just scratching the surface, right? There's a lot that goes into cover concealment and movement. A lot of gross and fine motor skills and a lot of repetition that goes into it. And I know this podcast episode may not do as well as like the top polymer striker fired handguns. But that's okay. I think stuff like this is more important. So if you found this valuable, I hope that you'll consider liking, subscribing, sharing it, maybe even becoming a patron to help make godly men strong and strong men godly. To help the people listening that are good, godly men be prepared. And knowing how to work cover concealment, move while reloading and setting up on a barricade, that's probably infinitely more important than the Glock 19 versus the Smith & Wesson M&P. Like, there's some difference there. I have a preference. But talking about surviving a violent encounter, knowing these skills is probably exponentially much more important. Despite what Hollywood would have you believe, gunfights don't generally go down where two men walk out in the street, wah, 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 at high noon and just stand there and trade shot for shot. Maybe that became like a Hollywood thing because it's easy to just get it all in frame and it makes a good picture. But I don't think that's what's going to happen if you have a violent encounter, because I've never seen one go down like that. So cover concealment movement, again, you want to do well in a gunfight. Number one, you need the grace of God. I've survived many a sticky situation and felt the kiss of death, and here to tell you about it, not because I'm good, but because God was good to me. I made it through, and a lot of other really good men did not make it through. And not because I'm special, but because God has a purpose for me. I'm humbled that He uses me to serve you guys, the gunfighting tribe, at all. Because He certainly doesn't need me for anything. I need Him for everything. So surviving a gunfight is a lot more about, one, having God on your side. When it's your time. And not being in fear because you know God is with you. And also, it's a thinking man's game. There's a lot that goes into it. And there's a lot more important things than what name is stamped on the side of your gun. Anyway, with that, I think this episode was a lot of tactical tips. So I'm going to roll into the tactical verse of the day. Very fitting with what we just talked about. If we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. Therefore, whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. For to this end Christ died and rose and lived again, that He might be Lord of both the dead and the living. But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, As I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us shall give an account of himself to God. Commentary. Remember what's really important. You win a dozen gunfights and you die and go to hell, you lost, right? Game over. Remember what's really important. Whether we live or die, we are the Lord's. So if you are still alive, drawing breath, be thankful to God, the giver of life and the sustainer of your life, and serve Him. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.